That means it's party time, people. Okay, you're with me on a Monday. Our team, I'm incredibly grateful that you're here and in our community. And we're going to answer some questions. I want to go through some text messages that we have received. Some of the content we cover, you'll already be at that part of the journey and you'll be like, why are we covering this? I've already been through this. Just bear with us. But the goal is to answer some questions that go from sentencing all the way through prison and everything in between. If you have any questions, please add them to the chat bot or the chat or raise your hand and I'll call on you. When you speak, please unmute yourself. And I have muted everyone right now. So thank you. A couple of questions I want to juror with. I see Dr. Cohen on the top left. Banking issues. It is inevitable, regardless of the crime. Firings are coming. I actually had a running list in my office for a while of how many banks fired me. And then I said, that's it, that's enough. So I was immediately fired from Bank of America after they found out about my conviction. I have learned there is no worse bank, ironically, than the Bank of America, because if it's all of America, America includes felons. So no one is worse than B of A in firing you. It was funny for a while. The Bank of America had television commercials, and the person doing the commercial was a convicted felon. The irony is he can get paid to do ads, but he cannot have a bank account there. So you can expect to get fired from myriad banks time and time again. What I just did, I opened up accounts everywhere. At one point, I had 6 checking accounts with about $87 at Bank of California, Union Bank, Wells Fargo, Chase, Citi. You open them up everywhere, and believe it or not, Wells Fargo and Union Bank allowed me to keep my money there. We have myriad instances where the wives get fired too, and it's like, what did my wife do? She didn't do anything. Oh, they'll say she married a criminal. Understand? They will fire her too. So to the extent that you can even keep accounts separate, it is probably a good idea because the banks don't care. I share this story. We had someone in our community, really rich dude, had about $200 million with his asset manager. He got fired. The asset manager was devastated because it's a huge account. And he's like, why would they fire me? Isn't 200 million a lot of money? I'm like, yes, but relative to the billions they manage, it's a compliance risk. It's a rounding error. You're a felon. They don't want your business. So these are the consequences. So Dr. Cohen, my advice, open up accounts everywhere. I have found online banks to be successful. Even some little credit union banks out of like Michigan and Atlanta. Just open up a lot of accounts. Eventually it's going to stick as we continue to let people in. I see a hand raised. Does it have to do with this specific subject?
Yes.
Go ahead.
So I've been with TD Bank since my arrest because Bank of America closed my account. And I just got clemency last week. Is there any point in me being on this call?
I don't know the answer to that question other than I can say to you, congratulations on the clemency, but as getting clemency, you're still, as I understand, a convicted felon. You weren't pardoned, so the conviction remains. So you could probably still have the same banking issues. So I'd encourage you to continue to open accounts. There's a chance the account stays. There's a chance they fire you.
I said TD Bank is 9 years with me since
The answer
I've been charged 9 years ago when I was
the answer
charged.
Yeah, I heard the question. The answer is I don't know. What I'm saying is it could happen. And when it does happen, or if it happens, you want to be prepared to pivot and try to cultivate relationships with other banks. I hope it doesn't happen. We had someone recently get fired from E-Trade. Some of the online banks are the worst because they clear through some of the big clearinghouses. But I don't know. My only advice is to continue to cultivate relationships. Thank you for being in our community. It's really good to have you. Now, before I get into some of the specific questions, I want to remind all of you that we give away as much content as we possibly can. And for that reason, I'd encourage you to spend time not just at White Collar, but also at Prison Professors, where we continue to give away courses. And when I send out the replay to this webinar, in fact, at some point, I'll even add these courses. We have the course on how to cultivate character reference letters, preparing for the probation interview, sentencing hearings, release plans, if you need to work on redesignations or delay of your surrender, commutations, administrative remedies, things that pop up while you go through the system. We have these courses to help guide you through it, and we're going to share all of them with you. My suggestion is you absolutely go through it. Okay. The second question I wanted to ask was, or address was, someone frustrated that they had created some really compelling content for their probation officer. And this ties into the issue of sentencing. They had created the content for their probation officer and then shared it with the lawyer. And the lawyer essentially said, I would share the text message, but it's private. Just trust me. The lawyer said, this is the best letter I've ever read. I've been doing this for more than 30 years. This is a phenomenal letter. I applaud you for writing it. And what was the messaging in creating the letter? This is the advice that I would give to you, whether you're preparing for sentencing or you're looking to get out of prison early. And maybe when I send the replay out, I will write up a little summary of this. This is what our client said. Hi, Mr. Lawyer. I'm scared. I'm freaked out to go to prison. I don't want to go to prison. So to prepare, I'm up all night. I can't sleep. And through this research of living online, I came across a really interesting article. There is this dude on the homepage of the Bureau of Prisons website who served 26 years in prison. And there was a photo of him with a warden. And I'm like, how does a guy who served 26, we wrote all this to the lawyer. Authentic, we're not lying, it's true. This is how he found us. I was inspired that a guy who served 26 years in prison would be on the BOP website. I also found him on the Department of Justice website too. Based on that, I reached out because I wanted to learn more about this guy. Based on the Google searches of this guy, Michael Santos, I came across some really interesting interviews with federal judges. I watched this one interview with Judge Bennett 35 times. That might sound crazy, 35 times, but I'm a felon. I have kids. I don't want to go to prison. So based off the interviews with Judge Bennett and Judge Boo, I invested about 200 hours writing a letter that I hope you'll read. And it really tries to demonstrate that I actually do care about victims and I'm sorry. It's the reason I'm setting aside every dollar I can for their benefit. And why I'll never return to another courtroom. Will you read it? That's kind of the letter, very vulnerable, very honest. But you notice it's not coming from some team at White Collar Advice. Some lawyers may view us as a threat. Oh, we want all the money. Oh my God, someone is going to step in and help hold a lawyer accountable. Because the truth is, you don't know how to hold a lawyer accountable because you're not really criminals and you're never going to go through this again. Let's just be very direct about that. If I did a whole webinar on questions you should ask your lawyer, many of you later in the process would say, if I knew those questions earlier, I'd have a different outcome. So we should embrace that. Even lawyers, we know who are on this webinar and send us a lot of business. So we wrote it from the perspective of this is what federal judges told us to do. And the lawyer said, I liked it. And the lawyer said, I love it. However, I am not going to send this to the probation officer because I've never done it before. And you're going to get resistance at all stages of the journey. So we sent a rebuttal. I watched the interview with Judge Bennett where he said he would be impressed if a defendant took the time to write the probation officer because it shows they took it seriously. Further, if I write it now and I lay out a vision of what I'll do moving forward, I can update the narrative before sentencing. Does that make sense? The lawyer still said, no, I've never sent it. I'm not going to. So you have got to get to a point where you eventually say, I accept responsibility for my own life. You love the message, you love the narrative, you think it's going to help me with the judge. Why would I not use it to influence the probation officer who's going to recommend how long I should serve in prison? We also did an extensive webinar where I profiled the book Persuasion. Great book, you should listen to it. And in the book Persuasion, the whole premise is this. Your job right now, if you haven't been sentenced, is to persuade people that are going to persuade your judge. Your job right now is to persuade the probation officer who will eventually oversee you on supervision. So people have said, well, I'm not getting sentenced for a year or 9 months. I may get 3 years. I'm going to influence the probation officer that I might not see for 5 years. Yes, Dennis didn't get the outcome he wanted at sentencing, but he has done work. I can assure you that it's going to lead to an earlier release and more liberty when he comes home, including volunteering for our nonprofit for a year in the halfway house and getting off supervision early. All of that work will pay off. It will influence stakeholders to differing degrees. So finally, the client said, you love this. I accept responsibility for my own life. Would you like me to sign a waiver that says if this goes wrong, I accept responsibility for my own life? The lawyer said, no, F it, fine, send it. He did. And the probation officer said, it's the best letter I've ever read as a probation officer. How'd you get this idea? I can tell you how I got this idea. I'm up all night because I'm afraid to go to prison. I came across this dude featured on the BOP website and I watched his videos. Great interactive discussion with the probation officer. She views him totally differently. And the great thing is we teach all of you how to do it for free, presuming you want to go through our probation report course. And I hope you can see that here on the left. It takes about 3 hours. I used to charge thousands of dollars to train people through this course. Don't do it anymore. It's free. Michael and I lead it, and you'll see the interviews with judges, including templates on how to write your lawyer who says, I love it, but we're not going to do it because they're stuck in the 1940s. Don't care. Lead. It's your life. That transitions into this text message I received while I was taking my 6-year-old son on the golf course. It didn't go great. This guy texted me and said, that was fun. $700,000 down the drain, only to get a plea agreement that got worse over time. Now I have 3 days to take it, the plea agreement, or they said, the US attorney said I can go to trial. I found this video. Is your lawyer an order taker for the AUSA? I wish I found this video sooner. Merry Christmas. The feds ruined mine. So if we're going to accept responsibility for our own life, we've got to accept, I know this lawyer that he hired, and guess what? It's a pretty good lawyer. The lawyer didn't bilk him. The lawyer didn't steal from him. This defendant gave the idea he could prevail at trial, that he was innocent. So he gave about a $700,000 retainer, which would be the fee had he gone all the way through trial. It also would be the fee if he pled guilty. So he gives this fee, and in interviewing this defendant, he did absolutely nothing to influence the plea agreement. Zero, zilch, nada. There are people in our community who are like, I want to act. My lawyer says I should wait. He's negotiating. They tell me it's too early, even though they indicted me, even though I gave a retainer, even the US attorney is preparing for trial. They think I should wait. They're not right for our community because they're lazy. They don't believe in advocacy. They sit back, scratch checks, and do nothing. And that's essentially what this defendant acknowledged, because he referenced this video I filmed years ago called Is Your Lawyer Simply an Order Taker for the United States Attorney? And that's how a lot of people feel when they get their plea agreement. Oh my God, I hired this lawyer. The plea agreement looks, this is terrible. None of it's true. I should have gone with a federal public defender. So my advice to him was, I'm not saying your plea agreement would have been any different, but there are some things you could have done to influence it. Let me make this interactive. Any of you who have yet to plead guilty, is there anything that he could have done or you could try to do to persuade the signing of a plea agreement? Anything at all? Please unmute yourself and contribute. This coffee's like death over here. My God, my wife, my God, we have to talk about the coffee in the Paperny household. Let's talk, people. Come on, it's Monday at 1:15. We're talking about prison, and we're not dying here. What is something someone can do? I can do this for days. I don't care. Is there
Hi.
anything someone can do to influence the plea agreement?
So I am exactly in the same boat. I'm not even guilty, but I pled guilty because my lawyer said if I pled guilty, I could only plead guilty to 2 counts instead of 13 that I was indicted for. Uh, and I'd already paid him upfront. So the moment, I'd finished paying him everything, he was like, oh, just take the plea. And before that, he was like pushing me off, wait.
Thank you. So here's what happens at times. And I say this, and some of my closest friends in the world are lawyers. I love them. I'll come to you in a second, Patricia. Okay. There's no guarantee that you're going to get the plea agreement you like. We can't change what brought you here. But what we don't want is for you to move forward in this process and say, I have more regret, which is what most defendants have. So what you could do is like something like Joseph DiGregorio did on our team. Now, in his case, it influenced his plea. But what did he do when Joseph retained our team? But whether you retain our team and do it on your own, we give everything to you. But not everyone wants to do the work, and we should acknowledge that. I will test how many people will enroll, will accept the free course, and how many people go through it. And it aligns with what Tony Robbins says. He said, if 100 people buy my book, only about 8% of them go through it. They buy the course, they buy the book, they spend the money in a euphoric moment, they don't actually do it. I'm giving this to you. What Joseph did was he hired a lawyer and he said, Nicholas, I've been up all night watching these videos of federal judges, the same message. Here is a document that I wrote, Mr. Lawyer, with every detail of my life. Therefore, if the lawyer knows every detail of Joseph's life, the good and the bad, he's in a better position to negotiate on his behalf. Because what a lot of lawyers will say, including mine, is, you just give me BS and nonsense. I can't filter through it. You don't give me anything at all. Half-truths, you feign ignorance. I didn't mean to do it. You kind of did this. And what you don't do is recognize and own what federal judges have told us. Judge Boo, in a YouTube video, said, he shared in this video, he shares the story of someone convicted of a massive drug crime or something akin to that. And he's like, the defendant basically admitted to being a big drug dealer, which comes with a mandatory minimum, a long sentence. But in the next vein, he said, but Your Honor, I didn't have the gun. He's like, I'm kind of inclined to believe he didn't have the gun or use it when he just acknowledged a huge drug crime with a lengthy mandatory minimum sentence. The point is, the more that you can admit and own, the better you're in a position to get a plea agreement that's more honorable. But if you don't own and acknowledge what you've done, I hate to say it, they look at us as trash and scum, as criminals, not as fathers and husbands and spouses and little league coaches. Even now, they don't look at me as a husband and father. I know because I see some messaging from a pretrial services officer where I volunteer across the country. One wouldn't even go into the room that I was going to volunteer because I served time in prison 15 years ago. I don't care. This is the stigma. Prepare for it. So the plea agreement for this defendant would have been more factual if he at least owned what he did. Couldn't do it. He could not do it. It's the reason his plea agreement is garbage. And it's the reason today, the 16th, he signed a plea agreement he doesn't agree with, despite 700 grand. You could also ask the question, had he accepted responsibility 6 months earlier, could it lead to a shorter sentence because the government would have less resources invested in his case? Probably. I've been to enough sentencing hearings where a U.S. attorney will say, yes, she pled guilty, Your Honor, but how long did it take for him to get here? How much time has he wasted to get here? He's not really remorseful. He's only remorseful because he got caught and he knew he couldn't prevail at trial. So if you're in this pre-waiting stage, you're already in prison. If you're guilty and you know you can't prevail, I'm not a lawyer, use your cognitive thinking skills and assess. And if you're waiting or negotiating a plea, influence it as Joseph did with a life story. Get vested in volunteer work. The further away from volunteer work, the better, because it looks authentic. It's real. It's not made up. It's not manufactured. And then document it. Document it. I continue to share the story of an 84-year-old judge I met in Fort Worth, Texas. After I lectured, I was on my way to this country club where Ben Hogan was a member. I wanted to see it. The judge grabbed my arm on the way out, and I'm like, I want to go see where Ben Hogan was a member. He grabbed my arm and he said, let me tell you something. I'm a mean, old, retired judge. Here's the best piece of advice I can give you. If it ain't documented, it didn't happen. If you say something and it's not documented, according to judges, it's not real. It's happy talk. It's what they're used to hearing every single day. I would like to go to question 2. We're going to talk about prison in a moment. Are there some hands up right here that I see? I see some hands up. Chris James. Chris, how can I help?
Well, I mean, you had asked for people that had not already pled guilty, so I just didn't know if my experience and how I was able to get a lesser or a more favorable plea agreement would pertain, or if you guys.
To the extent that you can be succinct and share it, I think our community would love to learn from you.
Yeah, definitely. So in my case, there were 5 co-defendants. Even the one who was the federal witness received a sentence of 27 months. He was the one who initially gave them all the information. I walked away with the judge coming down with 21 months, and I was the last person to be interviewed. But what I found is being sincere in my regret for the things that I did. You know, most of these cases are so long ago, and mine was about 7 years ago. So not only showing true remorse for the things that I did, I went as far as writing an apology letter to the defendants or to the victims. And it wasn't because I thought that it would help my case. It was because I truly felt that they deserved an apology. You know, I took full responsibility for everything that I did. And I had remorse for it. And I was able to document and show the things that I've done in the last few years to turn my life around and to make sort of living amends to the wrongs that I've done. And when I stood in front of the judge, he was the only person throughout the entire time. For the 2 years I was going through this entire thing, nobody cared about anything good I'd done. They only focused on the bad. And I felt like the good didn't matter. And he acknowledged it. And he said, you know, thank you for changing your life. And I recognize it and I can see it. And he gave me a much lesser sentence than anybody else in the case.
So it wasn't by accident. And the key word you used 3 times was documented. If it's not documented, it didn't happen. So I commend you for doing that work, for writing, for identifying with victims. On my screen here, and I want you to do this with your lawyer, ask your lawyer. Here's a terrific lawyer we do a lot of work with in Orange County. Her name is Diane Bass. I had my first case with Diane Bass about 10 years ago. And She said, give me a creative idea. Our client's about to go into proffer. The government thinks he's a real bad dude. I said, we wrote this great life story. How about you give the narrative to the prosecutors and the FBI agents before the proffer? And they did, and the U.S. attorney actually asked the defendant, our client, to sign it. And at the end of that narrative, this is the most important point. This transitions into the next question. You've got to lay out a vision of what you'll do moving forward. And then if you actually do it, you look authentic, because you can say 6 months ago, Your Honor, I said I was going to do this, and then I did it. And you're extending this timeline. Dennis will have this extended timeline that will take him all the way through prison. Dr. Cohen, you're looking there looking like a physician. You have done great things. Whatever this process has done to you, if it's not documented, it's going to be harder moving forward. Someone in our community, fingers crossed, a physician who's been home from prison for many years in California, he had to wait till he got off probation. It looks like he's going to get his medical license back, but I will tell you, he started making those decisions like 5 years ago, and here it's coming. Do the work and document it. Let's go to the second question. Someone was very upset because, and I'm going to come back to these questions. Someone was upset. Here was the extent of the text message from a loved one whose loved one is in prison. Tell Justin the case manager threw my plan, my release plan, in the garbage. I'm done. What's the point? So has anyone here, I guess, been to prison or who's now home who can share an uncomfortable experience with a case manager? Anyone here been? Joseph? Anyone? Can Scotty Carper?
Yes, I can. Casey
Okay,
Jackson.
so someone was ready to jump in. That means we have a story. Okay, give us a succinct story.
So I actually just got released. I had went in for a conspiracy to commit wire fraud, and my sentence was a 24-month sentence. However, it was, of course, reduced down. So I'm currently actually at a halfway house at the moment. But what made my story kind of unique is I was already accepted into medical school in the process. And thank you. And in the process of me going through this, my judge had recommended that I complete all of my graduate level courses moving forward into my doctoral program. So I was very fortunate to be able to move forward. But with that being said, I've had a bad experience right now with the case manager as far as like I am at a halfway house currently in Arizona, Phoenix, Arizona. And long story short, I have a whole plan put together, as my attorney had put my plan together prior to me going in and serving 6 months on my sentence, and then the rest at the halfway house. So I just feel like they don't really know what they're doing at the location that I'm at, and they're just putting people in positions. As far as moving forward, I had a plan in place from the time that I had went in. With me being fortunate and being accepted into medical school, they've tried to like at least help me like finish. So right now I'm currently at Midwestern University in Arizona, and then I finished my master's and I'm going to start at Howard University. She is not wanting to, like, I guess they're giving me pushback about transferring to DC, saying that I can't do that and I can't start medical school there. So she hasn't did the appropriate paperwork to move forward or anything. So that's some bad stuff there for me. So I'm kind of wary now.
Here's what I can tell you. I can tell you life in the halfway house dealing with some bureaucrats is even worse than a case manager in prison. And I say this knowing some staff occasionally is on the webinar. If they are, it's the way it goes. That is our experience. Many are undereducated and have unearned power, and they can make it difficult on someone like you who's young, who's educated and driven. They might not relate to that. So that's the reason you don't stop. You continue to advocate. I think if a lawyer wrote a plan, that's fine. It's more impactful if you create the plan and you write the plan. And then you should immediately share with your probation officer who will oversee you. That actually ties into the next question. You should write this plan, who you are, what you've learned, why you went to prison, how you were held accountable, your plans moving forward. You should immediately share with your probation officer, who supersedes a bureaucrat in the halfway house. Not much I could tell you. I would have that plan written by Friday. I would share it with all stakeholders, including the probation. I would also send it to your judge, because we've interviewed judges. I've attended sentencing hearings where the judge will say, I am going to continue to follow you. Some judges, of course, won't tell you that. Judge Carter loves to say, when you go to the halfway house, I want you to come and see me. And if you've done what you're supposed to do, I'm going to let you off supervision early. He says it at every sentencing hearing, including defendants I've seen him take remand into custody at sentencing, including a client of ours who we called a menace and said, I need you off the streets. The marshals, get him in here. He's going in. He still said to him, you do what you're supposed to do. You can come and see me in the halfway house. It was a 9-year sentence. The point is, you got to do that, Case. You got to share it with your judge because he's in a position to help. Share with your probation officers in a position to help.
Okay.
And that could have some influence, but time in the halfway house is the hardest part of the journey for some because you're so close to freedom and you're really dealing with a bureaucratic malaise that can be frustrating. Write it and share it. I suspect you're going to have a different outcome, which then leads to this question of case manager threw my plan in the trash. We're not living our lives, everyone, for a case manager in prison. Of course, some are going to throw it in the trash and hate it. Others are going to love it. Can you see my screen, everyone, where you see Michael Santos here on the right, the nonprofit? Do you see that?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
So Michael Santos served 26 years in prison. I met him there. There wasn't the First Step Act in prison that he helped pass. 10 years before the First Step Act passed, he wrote Earning Freedom about incentivizing excellence. People in the BOP, Michael's too humble to tell you, myriad people in the BOP would say the First Step Act origination or the wording comes from what you did through 26 years, but there was no mechanism to advance his release date in prison. Zero, but he did the work anyway. That's what all of you have to do. So to our friend who wrote a release plan and the case manager basically threw it in the trash, we're not living our life for a case manager. We're living it for our family, for our children, for an employer, for a funder, to live with dignity and can express that you've done the work. Had Michael stopped, we don't have this nonprofit that influences 1 million people in prison as we sit here right now. It doesn't happen. Content that he creates, 300,000 people on tablets have access to our work. Had he listened to educator people in prison who said, you don't get a degree here, it's useless, you have nothing coming, you're a convicted felon. We don't stop, but I'm well aware, there's Scotty Carper, I'm well aware you may create, and it might not influence people to the degree that it should. I think we saw that with Dennis in our community, but he's still here and working. All of you've got to do the same. So if your case manager throws your release plan in the trash, I'm sorry, that's life. What should you do? You continue to write it, share it with your probation officer. Because that then ties, and I'm going to come to questions in a moment, that then comes to the next message we got. I didn't really want to go, but I asked Mr. Shaw, who's his probation officer, and the probation officer said, okay, have a good trip. Someone in our community who served a 3 to 4 year sentence, documented his journey, asked his probation officer, Mr. Shaw, if he could go to a wedding in the Bahamas. And he he didn't even really want to go as much, he's like, I'm going to ask. And the probation officer approved it. Now that's very surprising because on probation, it's very difficult to travel personally. I traveled a lot for business. Has anyone here on probation been able to travel personally? Joseph, were you able to travel personally while you were on probation? You could. Yes. You were, because that's kind of uncommon. Chip, you're not even on probation yet. You haven't gone to prison yet. Anyone here? It's more uncommon. But anyone been able to travel?
Yeah, I was allowed to travel to both my kids' graduations.
Good. Okay. Jade, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I just kind of wanted to touch on a few things because I just been kind of following the overall movement. Kind of started with Michael Santos's story and kind of led me to kind of follow you guys as a whole. And so I just wanted to touch on a couple of things that I found to be valuable as far as just being an individual and advocating for yourself. A lot of times people take an attorney's word for it because they have credentials. You think a case manager supersedes you because of their position and where they are. I just want to highlight that it's really important that you remain steadfast in advocating for yourself, which means doing your own research, having others that love and care for you to do research for you, and reiterating and showing that you are knowledgeable as well. Because I think that stands to prove to be a really powerful point. I'm an advocate for others. I do just kind of freelance just as a hobby, if you will. So I've helped a lot of different people in the most recent case. I had a gentleman who was in a DV case that was facing 10 years. He was ultimately given 3 years probation, 5 years probation with 2 years suspended. is currently on probation, and we've just put in his first request for travel for personal, and I was just able to help him write up something really, succinct that helped the ultimate approval. I think it's really important that you really dive into the information that you guys have available. I really wish that everyone would. I'm also helping someone who's currently facing upwards of 20 years for a drug-related case. And I reached out to you guys because I wanted you guys to jump on board with us. But he was really just adamant about, my attorney says that's not a good job. As you always say, they don't ever want to incorporate you guys into the situation.
Well, let me chime in there. Thank you. Congratulations on your success. I think that you're right about the advocating, and I'm happy that people are able to travel on probation. Personally, I never was. So when I see a probation officer letting a defendant who owes restitution go to the Bahamas, I'm very encouraged by that. But I know it's because of the record that he had built. He also sends more in restitution than he's asked to, which is a very good strategy, in our opinion. Right? Joseph did that. I did that. And that actually ties into the next question. We got this text from someone who's not in our community. They won't even join the webinar. Joining a webinar on a Monday is beneath this person, which is okay. It's part of the reason he's having such a miserable experience he basically said that. I ain't got time for no webinar. It's kind of what he said to me. He said, wait a second, my wife makes the money, not me, yet he keeps pushing me for more restitution. Is that normal? Ironic, he can't attend a webinar on a Monday. He's unemployed. So listen, this person owes a lot of money in restitution, and his wife has a very good job. He's lucky. And the probation officer wants more restitution payment every single month. And he's like, but I don't make no money. So I can give you $100 a month. And he's making a huge argument. And of course, the probation officer says what a PO would say. Your wife pays for your health insurance. She helps put this roof over your head. You pled guilty and said you care about victims. But the irony is you don't give a rat's ass about the victims because you can't use your wife's income to help support a larger payment, but you'll let her pay for your food and your Tesla. It's just bad. And it's the reason he's having a nightmare experience. This is the type of person that will violate and go back to prison, because it's the type of person the probation officer is going to hone in on, I assure you. So don't be foolish. Look for work, be grateful. And if they ask you to send $300 a month instead of $100, if you have a spouse that makes big money, you know what you say is, absolutely, I will. And I'm going to continue to look for work. And I'm so fortunate and thankful. It's that simple. Okay.
Justin, I have a question.
Yes.
This is Vikas Mehta.
Yes.
Thank you. I just happened to put it in the group. I plead guilty about a year and a half ago. And all of a sudden, last month, they called me up, the AUSA, and they want me to testify against 4 of my co-defendants. So it's like I was indicted in 2021 in November 18. So is that good for my 5K or?
Probably. So look, as you're traversing the process, these things take a very long time. So of course, cooperation is like it's the Willy Wonka chocolate ticket, as a U.S. attorney told me one time, to a shorter sentence, because you're advancing the prosecutor's career. They're getting more convictions. I had a U.S. attorney kind of insinuate we'd rather have more convictions in cases than even collecting money for restitution. Then he's like, that's off the record. They want cases, they want to advance their career. So anytime there's an opportunity to cooperate, it's a good opportunity for you, presuming you're prepared. But what you don't want is to only cooperate, because there are judges who will say you cooperated because you got caught. You still have to have that remorse and plans moving forward. So work openly with your lawyer. Too many defendants are unprepared to meet with the government. They're just, it's a different situation. So make sure you spend ample time with your lawyer. And if you're going to cooperate, working even with the FBI agents or the U.S. attorney who's going to question you, you don't want to be caught off guard at a meeting like that. So I'm wishing you well as you go through the process. I would continue to build these assets, because eventually you're going to face a sentencing hearing. It's coming. I see hands up. Michael, my good friend Michael on the top leg. Craig, talk to me.
Yeah, I just wanted to give a good story. What you guys are talking about, I was battling for 2 weeks where my lawyer didn't want to see nothing about my narrative, and my probation officer, when I did the PSR report, didn't want to see it. And dealing with you and Scotty and Joseph, we wrote a nice email, sent it in, and forced the hand, because I had put the work in. but you guys helped guide me. And come to find out, both of those two individuals now want my template because they never seen that in the system. And they said that my district doesn't operate that and my judge is new. So my judge wouldn't want an SOP how it is. But everything that we had into the narrative, maybe it didn't get to go in the 5 pages I want, but she copy and pasted what was in it and put it into my report. And then they asked me, can they use my format? Because never seen that before. So just because you're told no and you stick to your guns, I said to myself, I asked my judge, I said, I asked my lawyer, have you ever been to prison? She said, no. And I said, well, I'm facing that. So this is why I want to do it. And you guys, you three gave me the courage to stay working with the working I've put in already. So I just want to say thank you to you and Scotty. But most importantly, I got to give a major thank you to Joseph, because not only has he been there, done that, got the t-shirt, he was willing to give me the t-shirt to wear. I borrowed his confidence to go into my meeting. And I think that we didn't win the war, but we definitely got a notch on our belt for that battle. So thanks to this group.
Well, thank you for sharing it. And I think the way you propose it to a lawyer is important. I think you first understand if they like the message. And if they do, you can go to the next step of saying, this is where I'd like to share it. Nicholas Kaiser's on this webinar. He's a great lawyer in New York. Not every lawyer is going to be progressive and open to ideas like Nicholas. Let's learn. How can we do it together? That's just the reality of it. You have to embrace that. So you've got to be like Craig and advocate, and you just don't stop. But again, accept responsibility for your life. It's always easier when you hear them say, this is a really great message. And it's like, well, if they really like the message, then you've got to teach them how to use it. And with what Craig did, there's also strategy involved. So Craig actually did some volunteer work through Professors Charitable Corporation, but he didn't overplay his hand even in writing that letter, because that volunteer work isn't fully developed and cultivated yet. But by the time he's sentenced, it will be, which means the narrative and plans will be updated with the progress from when he wrote it originally. He can share that growth. These are really good strategies and things we'd encourage all of you to consider. I'm happy to answer a couple of more questions before I get to the next topic. I see.
Excuse me.
All I see. I see someone. Who is that? Is that Patricia? Is that Betty? Who is that?
No, it's Patricia.
Yes. What is your question?
I've been listening to some ex-convict channels, and they recommend that you don't go to the halfway house. That's a trap to put you back in the system.
Okay, let me just jump in, because hold on, just in the interest of time, because I have to stop at just after 2, because I got to do a thing with CNN. We can't waste time. Let me cover it this way. Don't love the phrase ex-convicts. We're all people. And also, I don't care what they say. It's utter nonsense. It's garbage. In the age of the First Step Act, turning down the halfway house is akin to turning down a program. Imagine being in prison and wanting to stay in longer and not in the community. You only turn down the halfway house if you even want to, because you are not prepared. People in our community are prepared. You go to the halfway house, you work, it gets you to home confinement. Let's call each other people and persons instead of convicts. Betty, you're next. Betty, I thank you. I think your hand is there. Betty Bash, yes, if you want to unmute yourself.
I've been listening to you about the attorneys and all this kind of stuff and the letters and everything. My son just got sentenced. He cooperated fully. And I've pulled some reports, and they didn't do their job, but he wrote a letter to the family. We had several people write character letters for him. Especially we had the coroner of one of the prominent county coroners here write a letter along with some other people. But the bottom line is that the judge, just closed his eyes to everything, because number one, the judge, the attorney, the prosecuting attorney, and the girl's family, her dad is an attorney. They were all in the same inner circle. They were all friends. So he got the bad end of the stick, but they didn't listen to anything. There was a lot of circumstances as far as mental health and some other things, but none of that was ever brought up.
Let me chime in. First off, I empathize. I know it's hard to see your son get sentenced to prison. I know how my mom felt at my sentencing hearing. So I empathize with you, and I'm sorry. And I know at times it doesn't go the way that you want. What I would encourage you to do is I would encourage your son to share progress with his judge. And like, say, Your Honor, you sentenced me to XYZ. This is what you said to me at my sentencing. Here are my plans while I'm in prison. And there's precedent that this can work. My partner served 26 years in prison, really before commutations, before you can become extraordinary and compelling through the First Step Act. That is something that people don't recognize. The First Step Act allows people to become, if they can demonstrate that they're extraordinary and compelling, they can earn an earlier release from prison. People in our community, people on this webinar, like Tracy, have benefited from it. So that's what I would encourage your son to do. Write the judge, who you might not think cares, didn't give him the outcome you want. Write anyway. Share progress and growth for the future, including your son should have a prison professor talent profile set up. This profile is free. I pay for it. White collar advice. Every time someone retains our team, a good percentage of that dollar goes to the nonprofit to fund something like prison professor talent. So your son should have a profile up immediately. If he's already in prison, coordinate it. My mom did from prison, and you love him like she loves me. Create it, share the profile with the case manager. You've got to become extraordinary and compelling. And to the cynics out there who say, well, my crime doesn't qualify, it can and it will. There are people in our community like, remember Adam Clausen, sentenced to 213 years for robbing banks, got out because of the First Step Act. Or Helene Flowers in prison for murder, got out under the First Step Act. He went through Michael's programs in the penitentiary in Atwater. So if they can become extraordinary and compelling, can't you? Can't your son? Of course, but it requires work. So that's what I would encourage your son to do. Write a letter to the judge. Here's my progress and my plans while I'm in prison, Your Honor. You can follow my profile at prisonprofessorstalent.com. It costs him nothing but his time to produce.
He doesn't have access to computers.
I know he doesn't. Neither did I. He's going to handwrite it and send it home. And once it's typed, you send it to our interns and they're going to post it. It's free. We're going to do all of it.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry you're going through this. Hold him accountable. The experience will be easier. We want to help in any way we can. Start by using our free resources.
Hey, Justin.
Who is this? Hey, Mark. What's up? Talk to me, Goose.
All right. Good. How you doing?
Good. Thanks.
Good. Yeah. So thank you for inviting me. So you know about my case a little bit, and I have kind of an unusual situation, because I served life sentence already in California.
Yep.
Served 23 years. I'm getting sentenced next month. I'm still looking at 27 to 33 months.
Yep.
But I'm trying to learn all I can, but I'm going to be honest. I'm lost. I mean, there's so much going on here versus what I did in the state. I did a lot of programs in the state, went to college, although I didn't earn a degree, but I did a lot of vocational trades, things like that. But I've been like looking and researching things, and I see that they have, the sentencing guidelines get changed all the time, right? So
I don't think they get changed that much. I know as you face a federal sentence, 27 to 33, let me just quickly summarize what I think you should do. You want to make sure you've gone through the probation report extensively with your lawyer. You want to make sure it's correct. I would absolutely write this life story or this vision of what you intend, what you've been through, how long you've served, what you've done, how you've caught this new case, to use some prison parlance, how it will never happen again, what your plans are while you're in prison. I would really lay out that vision. It's probably 9 or 10 pages, 32, maybe 3,000 words. And the end of that vision or letter should express what you plan to do while in prison. So once you're done or you've been sentenced, you can continue to build on it. You should have a prison professor talent profile, right? If you've already been to prison, you're in a position to mentor people if you go. You're educated, right? You've been through it. You've got to share that progress with your judge. Just don't rely on your lawyer to share why you're worthy of a shorter sentence and I want your lawyer to do it. Well, but the judges are used to hearing it. In our experience, the judge has to hear it from you. So start writing a letter. Who are you? How did you get here? What have you learned?
Okay.
And work with our team or use our free resources, but we give it all. But the thing that we stress most is creating assets that will influence stakeholders. A narrative is an asset. A release plan is an asset. Doing volunteer work is an asset. And you've got to build it, right?
Right.
Scotty Carper on our team, he started with a blog in prison. It became popular. He wrote every day. 500 words became 50,000 words, becomes 100,000 words. It's a timeline that he could share. The success isn't made up. It's not by accident. So
Right.
I'm not asking you to do, Mark, what we haven't done and still do.
Sure.
You shouldn't be shocked or in awe of what to do at this point. Just start writing, creating an
Right.
authentic story that resonates with the judge, but write it from the judge's perspective.
Right. And that's what my attorney asked me to do. I'm going to write a letter. He wants me to speak to the judge during sentencing, but like you just said, I need to write, they wrote a narrative for me already, but I know that I need to include,
Yeah.
you know, what I want to do, my plans. And I am currently working at looking into working with at-risk youth. So I used to work with at-risk youth in prison. So I'm trying not to go to prison. I don't know if I get probation or house arrest, but you know, that's
These are when you say your lawyers wrote it, they didn't write a first person narrative. They write in the third person like a sentencing memorandum.
oh,
That's
right,
fine.
right.
There's a distinct difference. Okay. You've got to write your own narrative. You have questions, we're here. I'm wishing you success. Someone in our community, a good friend of mine, commented that the First Step Back only applies to drug related cases. It applies to some cases it does not, unfortunately. Our team is advocating for more prison reform. So that is what Michael Santos spends 24 hours a day doing. So the First Step Back that he helped pass, we want more. We want to bring back parole. We want all sorts of offenses to be qualified under the First Step Act. That's possible without new laws being passed. So that's what we're advocating for. So right now, some crimes don't qualify for the First Step Act. We are hoping that changes. We're hoping some successful programs like the elderly offender program that was very successful. We hope that comes back. So Aisha, right now, no. In time, we're hoping yes, which is why we want to build a record when these laws change or pass that the person has done the work so they're eligible, right? But we know some people who have gotten extraordinary and compelling releases. They were in for robbing banks, murder. It's possible if you build the record, but it doesn't happen without the record. And I know your family, you guys are absolutely building the record. That much we know. Let me get a couple more topics here, and then I'll come back to some questions. I'll go through them quickly. This is kind of a funny message. Someone said, my lawyer's taking credit, but I don't care. All that matters is it worked. Forget transparency. Incognito is the way to go. We favor transparency, but there's someone in our community, suffice to say, a lawyer here in Orange County, not a huge fan of the white collar advice because the lawyer basically said, it's more work for me. And I don't want to do more work, but you're making me work more. And I don't like it. You're asking questions you shouldn't ask. You're bringing up subjects I'm not ready to address. So no. So for that reason, our team kind of guided this person behind the scenes without the lawyer even knowing. And while I favor transparency, it doesn't change. This is business and people want our help to get the best outcome. So we did some work behind the scenes. The lawyer didn't know, and we got a great outcome. We're on our way to a good outcome because the probation officer recommended a sentence below the guidelines in the probation report, which is why the person wrote, my lawyer's taking credit. All that matters is it worked. Forget transparency. Incognito is the way to go. Insinuating, just keep guiding me. Nobody needs to know. This was a good example of a probation officer being influenced by a lot of the work the defendant had done. And it took a lot of work to get this work to the probation officer, a lot of work. So this is about advocacy, but however we get there is how we have to get there. Whether they know you're getting guidance or not, nothing matters as much as your willingness to lead and create with good messaging. And I will say, if you're going to do it on your own, or even with our free resources, which we want you to do, make sure the messaging is spot on. It's unfortunate how many people miss the mark and they don't focus on themselves. They focus on themselves instead of victims. Many people can't help it. Let me go through a couple of more here. Someone texted me, my lawyer won't share a memo. Is that concerning? He had watched a YouTube video I filmed where I had encouraged lawyers to I encouraged defendants to ask their lawyer well before sentencing, perhaps to review a few sentencing memorandums. The lawyer doesn't want to do it. Is it concerning? Maybe. Some lawyers will, they won't. I think it's a chance to see how well they write, how successful they've been. I know when Joseph hired Nicholas Kaiser on the bottom left, Nicholas was not afraid to share a few sentencing memorandums of outcomes in the Southern District where their client got a better outcome than the AUSA wanted. Yeah, you can get a sample sentencing memorandum. Another lawyer recently really got upset because a client wanted to do some role playing before the sentencing hearing, kind of get an idea what the lawyer was going to say. And the lawyer kind of said, I didn't go to law school to role play with you. It's not going to happen. It wasn't that comfortable. Let me go through a couple of more here. Someone said she pinned my talent profile, odd yet satisfying. This was actually someone in the halfway house, which is pretty rare. A lot of case managers and judges are aware of prison professor talent. I know because they comment on it. And it's very easy to share a URL. So there's someone in a halfway house back east. The case manager is very influenced. It didn't happen with Glenn, but Glenn's a great example of how to do it. She took the person's profile and she actually posted it. It kind of made him feel a little uncomfortable because he feels like he's standing out to other people. But she really did it as a testament to what everyone in that halfway house should do. So you never know who it's going to influence, but he thought it was pretty cool. And we're hopeful, of course, that it leads to more passes, a quicker release to the halfway, to home confinement. But there's no downside in writing. My philosophy, letters to my wife, thoughts, courage, and action. Just do this work and you're going to benefit. Your life will be better, I assure you. Last question I want to address on this webinar, and then we can turn to any final questions. Someone texted, is it better to work or volunteer? Both is great. If I had a choice, I'd encourage you to work because it gives you an opportunity to earn a living as a law-abiding citizen, and you can share that income and progress with the court. My judge commented that he appreciated that I had worked for 3 years before sentencing, as it helped me build a new record. So don't sit at home, don't do nothing. And even if you're looking for work and you can't get work depending on the crime or economic climate, we've had people submit how many applications they've actually submitted, right? We've had one person who was more than 200. Like, wow, 200 employment applications. If anything, it showed that he wasn't sitting on his ass all day. So I want you to think about those things. So I'd love you to both work and volunteer. If I had to choose one, you need to be making some money and building a new record, in my opinion. That said, last one. How do I send my release plan to my PO if I have no idea who it is? Make a copy of your release plan. It's not hard to find out which office will oversee you on supervision. Your lawyer can tell you. And I would just mail it to that office and make a copy. And we interviewed Chris Maloney, the former chief of probation, who talked more about that process. And you have to do the work and advocate for yourself. When I send out this replay, I will include the 57-minute video with Chris Maloney, the former chief of probation, and you're going to hear him express how to share that work with stakeholders in the appropriate manner and when to do it. So we've done the work for you, just need to watch it and learn and implement. Okay, but if you want to get it to the PO, I assure you there's a way. That said, it's 1:53. I'm happy to answer any questions. Very grateful for the engagement during this webinar. So let me see if there's any questions along the right. If there's any questions, chime in.
Justin, I wanted to chime in, Nick Kaiser. I heard earlier, the first point was my case manager doesn't give a shit about my release plan. And that may not be, but essentially they're lazy. So if you go in prepared with it, at some point, the deputy warden, the associate warden is going to say, hey, you got to move some bodies out. And if you have a plan in place that he can just upload to the system, make his life easier. It's so much easier for you to go in with the plan, pre-prepared. All he has to do is cut and paste. So rather than scrambling, better to do it in advance. That's point number one I'd like to take. And you can chime in on that. Point number two, the gentleman who was asked to give testimony at trial, that's the holy grail of cooperation, and he'll do immeasurably better by testifying. Why? Because that's what he signed up for. He's putting himself at risk. He outs himself to co-conspirators, and he puts him and his family at risk, and that will be greatly rewarded at sentencing. Those are the only 2 points I wanted to chime in on.
Thank you for doing so. Good to see you. Sent me an email. I'm going to respond. Good to hear from you. Thank you.
Hey,
anyone else that we have here? Chris, did you want to contribute again? I see Chris's hand up.
I did have a question. However, I feel like it's a very niche situation that I'm currently in. I don't know that it's going to help that many people in the group. So I'm happy to just sit back.
Whatever you want to do. If you want to message us or if you want to wait, I want to.
Maybe other people have a situation. I currently with my company, I'm able to maintain contracts well and earn an income while in prison without directly working, because I know you can't really work from prison. So I'm just kind of trying to get a better understanding of while I'm in what restraints I'm going to have. So if you think that's something to better message you guys directly, or if you want more.
I'll
on it.
cover that on a webinar, how to
Okay.
effectively run and manage a business from prison while following policy and not violating 408, which is a 4-level shot for disciplinary infraction. But there are ways to contribute and do it in a way with staff oversight where you're not, violating it. I can cover that.
Amazing. I'll look out for the webinar. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I'm interested in that topic as well. So
I know you are, my friend. Absolutely. Maybe we'll touch on that next week. And what I've learned, the more transparent you are with stakeholders, the more you share with them what your plans are, the more they're not going to be caught off guard, right? So I look at, we'll just go through specific examples, and I'll give you a little tease. By the way, I mentioned this in a webinar like a year and a half ago, and I got a really nasty message from someone because they're like, "Oh, you're showing underwear." Very, very upset. This is a client of ours. I'll touch on this more next week. Can you see my screen where it says Me Undies? You see
No.
this? You don't see it? Hold on. I'm going to show you right now. I'll show you. Hold on a second. Well, this will kind of tie into the business stuff that we're going to. Can you see this?
yes.
Okay. Thank God there's no underwear, so I don't get any hate mail. So this, hold on. Too much. This is a client of ours. He's the CEO of this company. And it's a huge company, probably $1 billion company. And he began growing it right before he went to prison. And he's like, how do I run this business from prison? I'm like, let's talk about it. And now 15 years later, it's a $1 billion business. So I'll cover part of how he did it in compliance with staff. Maybe we'll cover that next week on our webinar. And I have myriad examples of how to do it. What a great business this is. All automated. They're selling a lot of underwear and socks. So I'll go through some of that next week. Okay, no problem at all. Any other questions as we get ready to wrap up?
Yes, Justin, I have consistently been working. I get a job, and the moment I report to my, parole officer, after 2 or 3 weeks, I'm laid off. It's like somebody calls them.
Yes. I love that you're working. I admire you. Let me remind you something that Judge Boulware told us. Judge Boulware is a federal. When I repeat these things, it reminds me of how many damn sentencing hearings I've been to. That's what I did when I came home from prison. I'm going to share something with you that will help you, okay? Judge Boulware told us, good mitigation shares the collateral consequences of your conviction. Not in a whiny way, oh, woe is me, I broke the law, no one will hire me. Because a judge will say, yeah, you should have thought about that. Judge Boulware said if the defendant is doing hard work and they're really building a record, that's notable. And Judge Boulware went on to say, I filmed a YouTube video about it. He said, I know you're not going to a penitentiary. I've been to the penitentiary and I've been to a camp. Don't tell me the camp is a penitentiary. I know for most, the hardest part isn't prison. I know it's everything else. So I would convey to you, I would encourage you to write everything out. I started working. I got let go because of my conviction. I started working again. I got let go because of my conviction, but I'm going to continue to try. And I'm going to continue to seek opportunities. And I will never complain and I will never quit. Your Honor, these are the collateral consequences of breaking the law. It's different than most people who whine. They want all my money. No one will hire me. The banks will fire me. I can't keep my license. Yep. It's the consequence of breaking the law if convicted. Now, if you've gone to trial and you're innocent and you lose, I empathize with you. It's a totally different subject. But if you're guilty like me and you did it, it's a consequence. So use it as an asset to your advantage. That's exactly what Judge Boulware told us to do. That's what you need to do. You need to document it. What I would frankly encourage you to do is exactly what my good friend Joseph DiGregorio did. Build out a timeline. Do you know how powerful this would be?
Yeah,
I'm going to show
I
you
don't have the
something.
money to fight.
I'm going to show you something you should do. You should do exactly what Joseph did. Unfortunately, I'm on the wrong damn page. Hold on a moment. We built out this timeline of all of Joseph's accomplishments. You should build a timeline of every place you worked. Here, fired 2 weeks later. Here, 2 weeks later. Application, fired a week later. Fired 2 weeks later. And just show it and share it. The evidence is right there. That's how you stand out. That's how you look a little different. That's what I would really encourage you to do. You can do it on your own. You can work with our team. Just do it. Anyone going to prison. Mark, you should do it. Chip, you're working with our team. We should do that. What are you doing? Joseph did it. If Joseph did it, you can do it. I know you
In
can.
fact, I have an interview in 10 minutes.
I love it. You should hang up on us, go to the interview, then we're going to add it to the timeline. I wish you well. Just be honest. I hope you get the job. You're wonderful. Thank you for being in our community.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Okay.
Good luck.
Is that a wrap, everyone? It's at 2:00.
Yeah.
Questions here. I see Becky. If you want to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I just have a question. When my son he's been in 18 months at a federal prison in California. And when he was sentenced, his attorney just told us, he says, okay, I'm done, so he doesn't have an attorney, nobody he can talk to. What do you do in that case? And he can't, when I talk to him on the phone at the prison, there's no communication because of course they record everything. And so what do I,
So a couple thoughts here. One of the courses I'm giving away to you, it includes how to deal with issues without a lawyer. But some lawyers do view their role as done at sentencing, and other issues are then up to the Federal Bureau of Prisons, like designation, redesignation, transfers, things of that nature. Programs are going to be up to the BOP. To the communication aspect, yes, we're in prison. The phone calls are going to be recorded. So you should just expect that phone calls are recorded. You want to speak in a way that doesn't bring harm. Emails are recorded and they can certainly be read. I can assure you someone will offer your son an iPhone, which is a big no-no. But these things happen. But yes, every conversation is recorded. It's a consequence of this process. And I'd encourage your son. I would probably send your son our release plan book. When I send out the replay, I'll include it. He should write his plan. He should share it with his judge. But some lawyers don't view and many lawyers say, I'm here to help you, but there's nothing more for me to do. You've been sentenced to prison. I'm not an expert in the BOP. What do you want me to do? The lawyers
right. And he's such a fantastic kid. I mean, this is one mistake and, he's very remorseful. And he's the type of person that makes friends with everybody. And so he draws near to the handicap or anybody that he can help. And so while he's been in prison, he has reached out to those who don't have family. He bought an older guy a pair of glasses so he could read. I mean, he's just that type of individual. So how do you document that type of thing? I mean, I wish they could all see what kind of person he truly is.
Well, that's a good wish. And the way that you do that isn't by saying it, by doing it. That's why Prison Professors Talent is a resource. So someone earlier today retained our team. And when we spoke with him, we said, we want to let you know your support is going to help fund our nonprofit. And he said, I like hearing that. So this is Prison Professors Talent. This is how he does it. He's got to write, he's got to create, he's got to share it. So when I send out the replay, he should be writing on Prison Professor Talent. We incarcerate so many people. I was going to maybe film a TikTok video about this. I just read the Shoe Dog book about Phil Knight, the founder of Nike. And, in the book, he talks about outright committing fraud at some point, like the accounting numbers and he doesn't get caught and there's investigation and everything works out. And it's he's revered. He's a billionaire, gives away tons of money, but he's on all the boards. And it's he did things that people on this webinar have done. The difference is we got caught, we're convicted. He admits it, he didn't get caught. He writes about it in a book 40 years later, and he continues to be revered, but he did just as bad as us. He wasn't caught. The conviction and the perception changes so much of who we are and the way America views us. And we just have to embrace things as they are. So Becky, if your son is doing good work, share it, document it, right? I did that with my mom, who was very tough in prison, because she used to say, I'm not supporting you in retirement, so figure it out, and I love you. And then she left the visit. So that's
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I could share. I could write a book about funny things she said and some scary things too. Okay, we're at 2:05. Is there anything Great. It's good to see you on the top left there. I know you've been in our community. Thank you very much for contributing today and joining us. And is there?
Thank you, Justin.
You're welcome. Is there? That's a wrap. Okay. It's 2:05. Here's what you can expect from our team. I'm not sure. I've been tired. I'm up since 3:30. Where are we? Okay, we're going to get the webinar replay out. We're going to send these free courses. We're going to send you prisonprofessortalent.com. I will work on a summary letter that we wrote, that someone in our community kind of wrote to get their narrative in the probation report. But we need 2 days for it. And then we're going to be back. I don't know, maybe we take next week off. It's like Christmas. Do we take 1 week off and come back? I mean, are these so wonderful? We can't skip a week. Would it be devastating if we missed a Monday? I mean, we can't miss one Monday. Come on. Okay, we'll think more about. I'm having a phenomenal time by myself here. This is great. We'll decide on next Monday. For now, let's get the replay out. And we're so grateful that you're in our community. And Scotty, thank you for coordinating and helping get so many people in our community on this webinar.
And Justin, just a reminder to follow up on how to do business while we are in there, how to manage our business.
Did we talk about that today?
I'm sorry?
Did we talk about that today?
Yes, we did. You said
I'm just joking. I know I covered it 5 minutes ago. I was trying to make a joke, but nobody's laughing. Okay, yes, we're definitely going to cover it. I promise if we don't cover it next week, because we're going to take the week off for Christmas, or in my case, Hanukkah's coming. We'll definitely do it on the 30th, but you have my word, we're going to cover it.
Thank you.
I've really enjoyed our time together. I'm going to get back to work. You guys are great. Russell, good to see you on the bottom, and I'll see all of you in the next week or so.
Justin, Merry Christmas to you and everyone on the call. God bless.
I feel the same way. Thank you so much. Good to see you. I appreciate it. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.